You ever walk up to your own house and feel like something's off, like the place is still yours, but somehow not anymore? Yeah, that was me, standing in my driveway after a week in Arizona, suitcase in one hand, coffee in the other, just staring at a pile of twisted metal like my brain needed a second to catch up. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to realize what I was looking at. Those weren't scraps. That was my security system. Every single camera I owned, ripped down, smashed, and dumped like trash right next to my garage door. 6 cameras, gone. Not cheap ones either. I'm talking about a full setup, motion tracking, night vision, cloud backup. The kind of system that had already helped catch 2 break-ins on my street last year. And now? It looked like someone had taken a baseball bat to my peace of mind. And right where my front door camera used to be, there's this bright neon orange notice taped like some kind of badge of authority, flapping in the wind like it owned the place. I peel it off, read it once, then again slower, because surely I misunderstood. Unauthorized surveillance equipment removed per community privacy ordinance. I actually laughed, like a short, dry, what the hell kind of laugh, because I thought it had to be a mistake. My cameras didn't point at anyone else's property. Hell, my fence blocks the entire view past my yard. The only thing they recorded was my driveway, my porch, and the occasional raccoon with attitude problems. But no, apparently, according to whoever wrote this little masterpiece, I was violating the reasonable expectation of privacy of residents in a neighborhood I didn't even belong to. And that's when it clicked. Brookfield Grove, the gated community that popped up around my property about 5 years ago, all manicured lawns and matching mailboxes, the kind of place where people smile at you just long enough to judge you. My house. It was here first, long before their HOA, long before their rules, long before their obsession with controlling everything they could see, or in this case, everything they couldn't. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I made a phone call. I asked for the HOA president, and after a few transfers and one very suspiciously cheerful receptionist, I got her, Carolyn Drake. And let me tell you, she had that voice. You know the one. Calm, measured, like she's explaining basic math to a child who just can't quite get it. Mr. Carter, she says, stretching my name just a little too long. Your surveillance devices were creating discomfort within the community. Discomfort. I leaned against my kitchen counter, still staring out the window at that pile of broken cameras, and I said, they face my property. Simple, direct, end of discussion, or so I thought. But Carolyn, she didn't miss a beat. The presence of such devices, she continued, can foster an atmosphere of distrust, which is contrary to the values we uphold in Brookfield Grove. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear for a second, just to make sure I wasn't being pranked. I don't live in Brookfield Grove, I said slowly, like maybe she needed to hear it spelled out. My property isn't under your HOA. There was a pause, not long, just enough to be intentional. Your property is adjacent to our community, she replied, and therefore subject to certain shared standards. Shared standards, that was new. I could feel something shifting in my chest, not just anger, something sharper, like the realization that this wasn't a misunderstanding, this was deliberate. Where are my cameras? I asked, and that's when she dropped it, casual as you please. They've been disposed of as non-compliant electronic waste. Just like that. $3,000 gone. No warning, no conversation, no legal notice. Just gone. Because someone decided they didn't like the idea of being recorded, even if they weren't. I hung up without saying goodbye, because honestly, what was left to say? I stood there in my kitchen, staring at my own front yard like it had betrayed me. And for a second, I considered just letting it go. Replacing the cameras, maybe putting them up higher, avoiding the headache. But then I thought about the principle of it. About someone walking onto my property and deciding what I'm allowed to install, about the kind of precedent that sets, and something in me just refused to accept that. See, people like Carolyn, they rely on that moment, that hesitation, that internal voice telling you it's not worth the fight. They count on you backing down to keep the peace. And that's when I remembered something my nephew Ethan once told me over beers. He works in cybersecurity, the kind of guy who smiles when you ask him how things work, because he already knows 10 ways they can be exploited. He said, cameras are obvious. Obvious systems get targeted. The real security? The kind you don't see. So I gave him a call. Told him everything. Every detail, every word Carolyn said, every dollar I just watched get tossed in the trash. There was a pause on his end, then a quiet chuckle. "Oh man," he said, "they picked the wrong house." That right there? That was the moment everything changed. Because up until then, I was reacting. Now I was planning. All right, quick pause here, because what happened to me? It wasn't just personal, it's actually a really common playbook. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, you'll recognize the pattern real quick. According to standard procedure, HOAs only have authority over properties that are legally part of their association, meaning you signed into it, your deed reflects it, and you agreed to follow their bylaws. If you didn't, they don't get to just extend their power because your house happens to be nearby. That shared standards line Carolyn fed me, that's not law. That's intimidation dressed up in polite language. From a legal perspective, removing someone's property without consent, especially off their land, starts drifting into territory like trespassing, conversion, even destruction of property, depending on the state, none of which an HOA gets to do just because they feel uncomfortable. But here's where it gets interesting, because this wasn't just about rules, it was about psychology. This is a psychological trap. HOAs, especially the more controlling ones, rely heavily on social pressure and perceived authority. They speak confidently, they use official-sounding terms, and they create this illusion that resisting them will be more trouble than it's worth. Most people fold right there, not because they're wrong, but because they don't want the headache. And that's exactly what Carolyn expected from me, compliance through exhaustion. The lesson here is, when someone oversteps like that, especially behind a wall of community values, you're not just dealing with rules, you're dealing with control. And control only works if you agree to play along. So yeah, once I understood the game they were playing, I stopped thinking like a homeowner and started thinking like someone who just got pushed a little too far. And when I met up with Ethan that night, greasy takeout on the table, his laptop already open, I could tell by the look on his face this wasn't going to be a normal, replace what you lost kind of conversation. He leaned back, hands behind his head, and goes, "You don't need cameras, you need awareness." I raised an eyebrow, because that sounded like something you'd print on a motivational poster, but then he turned the screen toward me and started showing me what he meant: tiny wireless motion sensors, low power, mesh networked, each one barely bigger than a matchbox. No lenses, no recording, just pure detection, movement, direction, timestamps, location pings. "These don't watch," he said, tapping the screen, "they notice." And here's the beauty of it. Nothing illegal, nothing invasive, nothing that could be twisted into surveillance equipment under their little HOA narrative. Just sensors, sitting quietly, doing their job. I remember asking him, "How many would we need?" And he just smiled. That same smile that told me this was about to get excessive in the best possible way. "How much coverage do you want?" Fast forward to Tuesday, and my property looked exactly the same to anyone passing by. Same fence, same driveway, same quiet little house on the corner, but hidden in plain sight? 43 sensors, carefully placed along the fence line, tucked into trees, mounted under the edge of my shed, even blended into the texture of my mailbox post. You wouldn't see them unless you knew exactly where to look, and even then, you might miss them. Ethan synced everything to an app on my phone, clean interface, real-time alerts, logs you could scroll through like a timeline of movement around my house. First night, it was almost boring, notifications every few minutes, joggers passing by, a dog stopping a little too long near my fence, some teenager cutting across the sidewalk. Normal stuff. But then, patterns started forming. See, when you're not looking for something specific, you start noticing everything. 1:12 a.m., movement near the east fence. 1:14, same direction, slower pace. 1:16, pause. I check the log, it's someone inside my property line. I step to the window, lights off, just watching, and there she is, Carolyn Drake herself, heels in one hand, phone glowing in the other, stumbling across my lawn like it was her personal shortcut. I didn't even react at first, just watched. Because suddenly, all that talk about privacy felt a little different, didn't it? And it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, the system started painting a very detailed picture of the people who had been so concerned about being observed. Board member Richard Hale, 5:47 p.m., pacing in his driveway, gestures sharp, voice raised. arguing with someone on speaker so loud I could practically hear the frustration through the glass. Treasurer Monica Velez. 3 separate evenings, same time window, slipping out, walking down past the entrance of Brookfield Grove, meeting someone just outside the gate, staying there longer than a quick conversation usually lasts. Now look, I wasn't recording video, I wasn't spying in the traditional sense, but data, movement patterns, timestamps, repeated behavior. That tells a story all on its own. And I kept everything clean, organized, backed up. Not because I planned to expose anyone, but because for the first time since those cameras got ripped down, I felt like I had control again. And then, right on schedule, came the knock. 2 weeks, almost to the day. I opened the door, and there she was, Carolyn, but not the version I'd heard on the phone. No polished tone, no rehearsed authority, just a woman standing a little too stiff, eyes scanning like she was suddenly aware of every inch of space around her. "Mr. Carter," she started, voice lower now, "careful. We need to talk about your current security setup." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, letting that hang for a second. "What security setup?" I said, just enough innocence in my voice to make the point. She hesitated, just a flicker, but I caught it. "Residents have expressed concerns," she continued, "that their movements are being monitored." There it was. Not discomfort, not distrust. Concern. I nodded slowly, like I was really considering that. "That's interesting," I said, "because last time we spoke, I was told cameras were the problem." Her jaw tightened. "This is different." I tilted my head. "Is it?" And for a moment, neither of us said anything. Just stood there in that quiet standoff where both sides know exactly what's happening, but no one wants to say it out loud. Finally, she exhaled. "We may have overstepped," she admitted, the words clearly not her favorite. "The board is prepared to make this right." And just like that, the power shifted. Not dramatically, not explosively, just enough. They offered to replace every camera. Not just replace, upgrade. Full system, professionally installed, no cost to me. Written exemptions stating my property was not subject to HOA regulations. Formal apology, signed by the board. And the part that almost made me smile? A quiet acknowledgement that monitoring public adjacent spaces wasn't something they could restrict. I didn't say yes right away. Took my time, asked questions, made them sit in that discomfort a little longer. Because fairness? It's a lot easier to appreciate when you felt what it's like without it. But eventually, we came to an agreement. A few weeks later, I had a brand new camera system up and running. Better than the one I lost. Every angle covered, every feature upgraded. And the sensors? Oh, those stayed. Quiet, invisible, doing exactly what they were designed to do. Ethan even added a feature that let me share access with a couple of neighbors outside the HOA. People who actually appreciated knowing what was happening around their homes instead of pretending it wasn't. And the funniest part? Brookfield Grove got real quiet after that. No more notices, no more community standards, no more polite little power plays disguised as concern. Just silence. Turns out, people don't mind control nearly as much as they mind losing it. So here's the thing. This was never really about cameras. Not for them. Not even for me. Not in the way it looked on the surface. It was about control. Who gets to define the rules, who gets to enforce them, and more importantly, who backs down when those rules get pushed a little too far. Because if I'm being honest, there was a version of this story where I just replaced the cameras, kept my head down, and let Brookfield Grove keep pretending they had authority over anything they could see from their sidewalks. That version? It's quieter, easier, and it's exactly what people like Carolyn count on. The lesson here is, most overreach doesn't start with force, it starts with confidence. Someone speaks like they're in charge, uses the right words, maybe throws in a printed notice with official language, and suddenly, it feels real enough that you don't question it. But confidence isn't the same thing as authority, and if you don't stop and check that line, it gets blurry real fast. From a legal perspective, what saved me wasn't some genius loophole or technical trick, it was understanding where their power ended and mine began. I wasn't in their HOA, I never agreed to their rules, and no amount of community discomfort changes property rights. That's the part a lot of people miss. You don't need to escalate immediately, you just need to know your position before someone else defines it for you. And yeah, I'll admit, there's a psychological side to this that's hard to ignore. This is a psychological trap. When someone takes something from you, control, security, peace of mind. You feel this urge to either fight back hard or withdraw completely. But the smarter move is to shift the frame of the situation entirely. I didn't just replace what I lost. I changed the rules of engagement. Suddenly, the same people who were comfortable making decisions for me had to confront what it felt like to be on the other side of that uncertainty, that awareness that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as invisible as they thought. And no, I didn't expose anyone, didn't post anything, didn't turn it into some kind of public spectacle, because that's not what this was about. It was about balance. About reminding people, quietly, that boundaries go both ways. According to standard procedure, most conflicts like this don't resolve because one side wins. They resolve because one side realizes the cost of pushing further isn't worth it anymore. That's what happened here. Not a dramatic showdown, not a courtroom battle, just a slow, uncomfortable shift where the people who overreached decided maybe, just maybe, they'd gone far enough. And I think that's the part that sticks with me the most. Not the new cameras, not the apology, not even the silence that came after, but that moment when everything flipped, when the same voice that once talked down to me showed up at my door asking for a conversation instead of delivering a decision. So if you're watching this and you've ever dealt with something like this, an HOA, a neighbor, anyone trying to stretch their authority just a little beyond where it belongs, ask yourself this: are you reacting or are you thinking? Because those are two very different paths, and only one of them puts you back in control. And I'm not saying you need to go out and build some invisible system or prove a point, but I am saying this: know your ground, literally and figuratively. Because once you do, everything changes.